Good evening, friends, and welcome to another virtual performance brought to you by the No Refund Theater Alumni. My name is Andrew Leite, and I had the honor of directing and co-producing this project. Those of you who tuned in to our virtual performance of The Lion in Winter earlier this year may recall that show consisted of the original cast that performed it in Penn State's Forum building back in 2015. And the production was just as much a reunion as it was a play. This show, however, is a completely unique cast of NRT alumni from across our club's history, even including some current members. This cast assembled and collaborated over the past few months for this production, and the script was adapted directly from the novella by Charles Dickens for this medium. Each performance you hear was separately recorded by each actor during the video calls in which they were performed, and then compiled all together to form the entire show. This story deserves a retelling directly designed for this time in which we tell it. December 19th, 2020 marked the 177th anniversary of the novella's original publishing, but this taxing year in particular, the themes of the story are more relevant to our shared experiences than ever. The ideas that generosity and compassion are not only actions for a single time of year, that hearts and minds are meant to stay thankful and open, and that no one, no matter where they may be in life, however far from the ones they love, is ever beyond a meaningful change. But no need to take my word for it. I leave you now in the hands of our capable narrator, also me. I hope that this recording finds you and yours well, and that everyone is able to sit back and relax and enjoy A Christmas Carol, in prose being A Ghost Story of Christmas by Charles Dickens, adapted by Andrew Leite. Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was dead as a doornail. Now, I don't know of my own knowledge what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade. But the wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile, and my unhallowed hands shall not disturb it, or the country's done for. You will therefore permit me to repeat, emphatically, that Marley was as dead as a doornail. Scrooge knew he was dead. How could it be otherwise? Scrooge and Marley were partners for I don't know how many years. Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole friend, and sole mourner. And even Scrooge was not so dreadfully cut up by this sad event. There is no doubt that Marley was dead. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I am going to relate. If we were not perfectly convinced that Hamlet's father died before the play began, there would be nothing remarkable in his taking a stroll at night upon his own ramparts to astonish his son's weak mind. Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. The firm was known as Scrooge and Marley. Sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge Scrooge, and sometimes Marley, but he answered to both names. It was all the same to him. He was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire, secret and self-contained and solitary as an oyster. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, shriveled his cheek, stiffened his gait, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. He carried his own low temperature always about with him. He iced his office in the dog days of summer, and didn't thaw at 1 degree at Christmas. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say hello. No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle. No children asked him what it was o'clock. No man or woman ever once in all his life inquired the way to such and such a place of Scrooge. Even the blind man's dogs appeared to know him, and when they saw him coming on, would tug their owners into doorways and up side streets. But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked, to edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance. Once upon a time, of all the good days in the year, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. It was cold, bleak, biting weather, foggy withal, and you could hear the people in the court outside go wheezing up and down, beating their hands upon their breasts and stamping their feet upon the pavement stones to warm them. The door of Scrooge's counting-house office was open, that he might keep his eyes upon his clerk, Bob Crachit, who was in a dismal little cell beyond, copying letters.
Mr. Scrooge, if I may point out, the coal practically spills in through the keyhole. My own fire is not much more than a single coal. If I might, sir, ask...
If you complete that sentence you are forming, Bob Crachit, you may as well add your own letter of resignation to the pile you must copy today.
Yes, sir. I shall warm myself at my candle, shall I? Oh, I wish I was a man of stronger imagination for such a feat.
A Merry Christmas, Uncle. God save you.
Bah, humbug.
Christmas? A humbug. Uncle, you don't mean that, I'm sure.
I do. Merry Christmas. What right have you to be merry? What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough.
Oh, and what right have you to be dismal? What reason have you to be morose? You're rich enough.
Humbug.
Oh, don't be cross, Uncle.
What else can I be when I live in such a world of fools as this? Merry Christmas, out upon Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older but not an hour richer? A time for balancing your books and having every item in 'em through a round dozen of months presented dead against you? If I could work my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. He should.
Uncle!
Nephew, keep Christmas in your own way, and let me keep it in mine.
Keep it. But you don't keep it.
Let me leave it alone, then. Much good it may do you, much good it has ever done you.
There are many things from which I might have derived good, by which I might not have profited, I dare say, Christmas among the rest. But I am sure I have always thought of Christmas time when it has come around as a good time. A kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem, by one consent, to open their shut-up hearts freely, to think of the people below them as if they were fellow passengers to the grave and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe it has done me good, and will do me good. And I say God bless it.
The clerk in the tank involuntarily applauded. Becoming immediately sensible of the impropriety, He poked the fire and extinguished the last frail spark forever.
Let me hear another sound from you, Crachit, and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. You're quite a powerful speaker, nephew. I wonder you don't go into Parliament.
Oh, don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow.
If we are, in fact, as you say, fellow passengers to the grave, I shall dine with you after I take that voyage first.
But why? Why?
Why did you get married?
Because I fell in love.
Because you fell in love. That might be the one thing in this world more ridiculous than a Merry Christmas. Good afternoon.
Nay, Uncle, but you never came to see me before that happened. Why give it as a reason for not coming now?
Good afternoon.
I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends?
Good afternoon.
I am sorry, with all my heart, to find you so resolute. We have never had any quarrel, to which I have been a party, but I have made the trial in homage to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last. So a very Merry Christmas, Uncle.
Good afternoon.
And a Happy New Year to you as well, Master Clerk.
Yes, Merry Christmas.
Good afternoon. And what right have you, Bob Crachit, with 15 shillings a week, and a wife and a family, to be talking about a Merry Christmas? Sheer lunacy from the both of you.
Two portly gentlemen, pleasant to behold, now stood with their hats off in Scrooge's office. They had books and papers in their hands, and bowed to him.
Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?
Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years. He died 7 years ago. This very night.
Oh, we have no doubt his liberality is well represented by his surviving partner.
As the gentleman handed Scrooge his credentials, he could not know how correct he was, for Scrooge and Marley had been two kindred spirits. At the ominous word liberality, Scrooge frowned and shook his head and handed the credentials back.
At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessaries. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir.
Are there no prisons?
Plenty of prisons.
And the union workhouses? Are they still in operation?
They are. Still, I wish I could say that they were not.
The treadmill and the poor law are in full vigor then.
Oh, both very busy, sir.
Oh, I was afraid from what you had said at first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course. I'm very glad to hear it.
Under the impression that those institutions scarcely furnish cheer of mind or body to the multitude, a few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. We choose this time because it is a time of all others when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for?
Nothing.
You wish to be anonymous?
I wish to be left alone. Since you asked me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make myself merry at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the establishments I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there.
Many can't go there, and many would rather die.
If they would rather die, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population. Besides, excuse me, I don't know that.
But you might know it.
It's not my business. And it's enough for a man to understand his own business and not to interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue their point, the gentleman withdrew. Scrooge resumed his labors with an improved opinion of himself, and in a more facetious temper than was usual with him. Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened so, and the cold became intense. Foggier and colder still as the day grew dark. Piercing, searching, biting, cold. The owner of one scant young ruddy face, gnawed and mumbled by the hungry cold as bones are gnawed by dogs, stooped down at Scrooge's keyhole to regale him with a Christmas carol. But at the first sound of "God bless you, merry gentlemen, may nothing you dismay," Scrooge seized the ruler with such energy of action that the singer fled in terror, leaving the keyhole to the fog and even more congenial frost.
Back to work then, Crachit.
It's evening, sir.
Is it?
Christmas evening, sir. Yes.
You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose.
If quite convenient, sir.
It's not convenient, and it's not fair. If I was to stop half a crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used, I'm sure. And yet you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work.
It is only once a year, Mr. Scrooge.
A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier next morning.
I will, sir, to be certain.
Right then. Off with you. Off!
Yes, Mr. Scrooge. A merry, good evening to you, sir.
Scrooge buttoned his greatcoat to the chin and walked out with a growl. He took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, he went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. They were a gloomy suite of rooms in a lowering pile of building. It was old enough now and dreary enough, for nobody lived in it but Scrooge, the other rooms all being let out as offices. The yard was so dark that even Scrooge, who knew its every stone, was fain to grope with his hands. The fog and frost hung like stained curtains about the black old gateway to the house. Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door, except that it was very large. It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it, night and morning, during his whole residence in that place. Also that Scrooge had as little of what is called imagination about him as any man in the world. And then let any man explain to me, if he can, how it happened that Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, without its undergoing any visible change, not a knocker, but a face.
Jacob Marley?
It was not an impenetrable shadow, as the other objects in the yard were. It was not angry or ferocious, but looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up on its ghostly forehead. The hair was curiously stirred, as if by hot air, and though the eyes were wide open, they were perfectly motionless.
Scrooge.
As Scrooge looked fixedly at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again.
Oh, come now, Ebenezer, you are not one to be chilled by a fancy. Take up the key, Jansen. And then behind this door, let's get a candle lit to hand. Humbug. Come now, Ebenezer, no echo will chill you either. Up to bed.
You may talk vaguely about driving a coach and 6 horses up a good old flight of stairs, but I mean to say you might have got a hearse up that staircase sideways and done it easily. There was plenty of width for that, and room to spare, which is perhaps the reason why Scrooge thought he saw a locomotive hearse going on before him in the gloom. Half a dozen gas lamps out of the street would not have lighted the entry too well, so you may suppose that it was pretty dark, with only Scrooge's candle to bear against it.
There's nothing in this old house to ice my veins, humbug. I don't care a button for the cold, the darkness.
Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his rooms to check that he was alone. He had just enough recollection of the face on the door to desire to do that.
Sitting room, bedroom, lumber room. All as they should be. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa. Small fire in the grate, spoon and basin ready, and my gruel still upon the hob. Nobody under the bed, nobody in the closet, nobody. Oh. My dressing gown, my. You were handing up a suspicious attitude against the wall. Well, well.
Quite satisfied, he closed his door and locked himself in, double locked himself in, which was not his custom. Thus secured against surprise, he put on his dressing gown and slippers and his nightcap and sat down before the fire to take his gruel. It was a very low fire indeed, nothing on such a bitter night. He was obliged to sit close to it and brood over it before he could extract the least sensation of warmth from such a handful of fuel. The fireplace was an old one, and paved all round with quaint Dutch tiles, designed to illustrate the scriptures. There were Cains and Abels, pharaohs in their courts, angelic messengers, descending through the air on clouds, hundreds of figures to attract his thoughts. And yet, that face of Marley, 7 years dead, came and swallowed up the whole. If each smooth tile had been a blank at first, with power to shape some picture on its surface from the disjointed fragments of his thoughts, there would have been a copy of old Marley's head on every one.
Bah! Humbug, all of you!
As he threw his head back in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell, a disused bell that hung in the room and communicated for some purpose now forgotten with a chamber in the highest story of the building. It was with great astonishment and with a strange, inexplicable dread that as he looked he saw this bell begin to swing. It swung so softly in the outset that it barely made a sound, but soon it rang out loudly, and so did every disused bell in the house. This might have lasted half a minute or a minute, but it seemed an hour. The bells ceased as they had begun, together. They were succeeded by a clanking noise deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over the casks in the wine merchant's cellar.
Some ghosts in haunted houses are described as dragging chains. Bah! No. Humbug, I say.
The cellar door flew open, and then he heard the noise of chains much louder on the floors below, then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards his door.
It's humbug still. I won't believe it for an instant.
His color changed, though, when, without a pause, the sound came in through the heavy door and passed into the room before his eyes. The dying flame before him leaped up as though it cried, "I know him," before falling back again.
The same face. The very same. Marley, in your usual waistcoat, tights, and boots.
The tassels of his clothes were bristling, like his pigtail and his coat skirts and the hair upon his head. The chain he drew was clasped about his middle. It was long and wound about him like a tail, and it was made of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, and heavy purses wrought in steel. His body was transparent, so that Scrooge, looking through his waistcoat, could see the 2 buttons on his coat behind.
Oh, dear Jacob. I had heard you called gutless before, but only now do I see proof. No, nor do I believe it even now. How now? What do you want with me?
Much.
Marley's voice, no doubt about it. Who are you?
In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley.
Though Scrooge felt the chilling influence of those death-cold eyes, and marked the very texture of the folded kerchief bound about its head and chin, which he had not observed before, he was still incredulous and fought against his senses.
Can you sit down?
I can.
Do it, then.
You don't believe in me.
I don't.
Why do you doubt your senses?
Because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheat. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of underdone potato. There's more of gravy than grave about you, whatever you are. Humbug, I tell you, humbug.
At this, the spirit raised a frightful cry and shook its chain with such a dismal and appalling noise that Scrooge held on tight to his chair to save himself from falling faint. But how much greater was his horror when the phantom removed the bandage round its head, and its lower jaw dropped fully down upon its chest. Scrooge fell upon his knees and clasped his hands before his face.
Mercy, oh mercy, dreadful apparition. Why do you trouble me?
Man of worldly mind, do you believe in me or not?
I do, I must. But why do spirits walk the earth? And why do they come to me?
It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men, and travel far and wide. And if that spirit does not do so in life, it is condemned to go forth after death. It is doomed to wander through the world, oh, woe is me, and witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth, and what it might have turned to happiness. Oh.
You are fettered, Jacob. Tell me why.
I wear the chain I forged in life. I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Is its pattern strange to you? Or do you recognize in it the weight and length of the strong coil you bear yourself? Yours was full as heavy and long as this 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have labored on it since. Yours is a ponderous chain.
I can see no chains, but... Jacob, old Jacob Marley, tell me more. Speak comfort to me, Jacob.
I have none to give. It comes from other regions, Ebenezer Scrooge, and is conveyed by other ministers to other kinds of men. Very little more is all permitted for me to say. I cannot rest. I cannot stay. I cannot linger anywhere. Mark me. In life, my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our counting house, and now an eternity of weary journeys lies before me.
You must have been very slow about it, Jacob.
Slow? I travel on the wings of the wind, traveling all the time. No rest, no peace. Incessant torture of remorse. Oh, Ebenezer, captive bound and double ironed. Not to know that this earth must pass into eternity before the good of which it is susceptible is all developed. Not to know that any person working only in their little sphere, whatever it may be, will find its mortal life too short for its vast means of usefulness. Not to know that no space of regret can make amends for a life's opportunity misused. Such was I. Oh, such was I.
But you were always a good man of business, Jacob.
Business. The goodness of mankind was meant to be my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. At this time of year, I suffer most. Why, in life, did I walk through crowds of fellow beings with my eyes turned down, and never raise them to that blessed star which led the wise men to a poor abode? Were there no poor homes to which his light would have conducted me?
Jacob, well, perhaps your journeys should now continue.
Hear me! My time is nearly gone.
I will. But don't be hard upon me. Don't be flowery, Jacob, please.
How it is that I appear before you in a shape that you can see, I may not tell. I have sat invisible beside you many and many a day. That is no light part of my penance. I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate. A chance and hope of my procuring Ebenezer.
You are always a good friend to me. Thank you, Jacob.
You will be haunted by 3 spirits.
Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob?
It is.
I think I'd rather not.
Without their visits, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tomorrow when the bell tolls 1.
Couldn't I take them all at once and have it done with?
Expect the second on the next night at the same hour. The third upon the next night when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more, and look that for your own sake you remember what has passed between us.
When it had said these words, the spectre took its wrapper from the table, and bound it round its head as before. Scrooge knew this by the smart sound its teeth made when its jaws were brought together by the bandage. The apparition walked backward from him, and at every step it took, the window raised itself a little, so that when the spectre reached it, it was wide open. It beckoned Scrooge to approach, which he did. When they were within 2 paces of each other, Marley's ghost held up its hand, warning him to come no nearer. Scrooge stopped, not so much in obedience as in surprise and fear, for on the raising of the hand he became sensible of confused noises in the air, incoherent sounds of lamentation and regret, wailings inexpressibly sorrowful and self-accusatory. The spectre, after listening for a moment, joined in the mournful dirge, and floated out upon the bleak, dark night. The air out the window was filled with phantoms, wandering hither and thither in restless haste, and moaning as they went. Every one of them wore chains like Marley's ghost. Some few were linked together, none were free. Many had been personally known to Scrooge in their lives. He had been quite familiar with one old ghost in a white waistcoat, with a monstrous iron safe attached to his ankle, who cried piteously at being unable to assist a wretched woman with an infant, whom it saw below upon a doorstep. The misery with them all was clearly that they sought to interfere for good in human matters, and had lost the power forever. Whether these creatures faded into mist or mist enshrouded them, he could not tell, but they and their spirit voices faded together, and the night became as it had been when he walked home.
Well, See here now, the door's double locked, as I had locked it with my own hands, the bolts undisturbed. It could not occur. Did not. And would not, I say. It's all... Oh, never mind. Straight to bed, then.
Straight to bed he went, and Scrooge fell asleep upon the instant.
Oh. Well, such darkness about, I can scarcely tell glass window from papered wall. That old church clock should be on soon with the time.
To his great astonishment, the heavy bell went on from 6 to 7, and from 7 to 8, and regularly up to 12, then stopped. 12! It was past 2 when he went to bed. The clock was wrong, and Icicle must have got into the works. 12.
Why, it isn't possible that I can have slept through a whole day and far into another night. It isn't possible that anything has happened to the sun, and this is 12 at noon. Let's see now. With the frosted glass and fog, I can hardly see. While there is no noise of people running about, as there unquestionably would be if night had taken possession of the world. A great relief for my kind, as a bill of exchange signed for 3 days on a dayless earth would become a mere United States security with no days to count by. Back to bed. But I cannot make anything of that clock, and Marley. Was it a dream or not? When the bell tolls 1. Three-quarters of the hour gone, my hour of visitation. Well, I cannot now more go to sleep than I can go to heaven, so the wisest decision is to wait for the hour to pass.
1. Light flashed up in the room upon the instant, and the curtains of his bed were drawn aside, I tell you, by a hand. Scrooge, starting up into a half-recumbent attitude, found himself face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew them, who was almost immediately at his elbow. It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man, viewed through some supernatural medium, which gave them the appearance of having receded from the view and being diminished to a child's proportions. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. The arms were very long and muscular, the hands the same, as if its hold were of uncommon strength. Its legs and feet, most delicately formed, were, like those upper members, bare. It wore a tunic of the purest white, and round its waist was bound a lustrous belt with a beautiful sheen. It held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand, and its dress was trimmed with summer flowers. But the strangest thing about it was that, from the crown of its head, there sprung a bright clear jet of light, by which all this was visible, and which was doubtless the occasion of its using, in its duller moments, a great cone-like extinguisher for a cap, which it now held under its arm. As Scrooge looked at it with increasing steadiness, as its belt sparkled and glittered now in one part and now in another, and what was light one instant was at another time dark, so the figure itself fluctuated in its distinctness, being now a thing with one arm, now with one leg, now with 20 legs, now a head without a body. No outline of the dissolving parts would be visible in the dense gloom wherein they melted away. And in the very wonder of this, it would be itself again, distinct and clear as ever.
Are you the spirit, sir, whose coming was foretold to me?
I am.
Who and what are you?
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Long past?
No, your past.
Having just woken, Spirit, my eyes are quite overwhelmed by your peculiar light. Pray, perhaps we could converse more after you don that cap of yours.
What? Would you so soon put out with worldly hands the light I give? Is it not enough that you are one of those whose passions made this cap, and force me through whole trains of years to wear it low upon my brow?
Oh, Spirit, I promise you truly to have meant no offense by it, nor have I ever willfully bonneted such a spirit as yourself at any period in my life. Well now, here I am, apologizing to one who would see my sleep interrupted. Spirit, tell me what business has brought you here, and let us be done with it at once.
Your welfare.
As obliged as I am to you for the most noble intentions, Spirit, I cannot help myself thinking that perhaps a night of unbroken rest would be more conducive to that end.
Your reclamation, then. Take heed. Rise and walk with me.
The grasp, though gentle, was not to be resisted. He rose, but finding that the spirit made towards the window, clasped his robe in supplication.
I am a mortal, and liable to fall.
Bear but a touch of my hand, and you shall be upheld in body and spirit.
As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall, and stood upon an open country road, with fields on either hand. The city had entirely vanished, not a vestige of it was to be seen. The darkness and the mist had vanished with it, for it was a clear, cold winter day, with bright snow upon the ground.
Good heaven! I was bred in this place. I was a boy here.
Scrooge was all at once conscious of 1,000 odors floating in the air, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes, and joys and cares long, long forgotten.
Clearly, the touch of my hand uplifts you still. Your lip is trembling. And what is that upon your cheek?
A pimple. Spirit, your purpose for bringing me here of all places must bear some significant weight, or else you would not keep me suspended before your purpose. Lead me where you will.
You remember the way?
Remember it? Why, I could walk it blindfolded.
Strange to have forgotten this place for so many years, then. Let us go on.
As they walked along the road, Scrooge recognized every gate and post and tree, until a little market town appeared in the distance, with its bridge, its church, and winding river. Some country carts were seen trotting towards them, driven by farmers who called to one another across the way. All were in great spirits and shouted to each other, until the broad fields were so full of merry music that the crisp air laughed to hear it.
Do not hope to join them here. These are but shadows of the things that have been. They have no consciousness of us.
I know, and can name every one of those travelers, Spirit. I confess myself bewildered by my own heart. Why am I rejoiced beyond all bounds to see these peoples of my past? Why am I filled with gladness to hear them give each other a Merry Christmas? What is Merry Christmas even to me? What good has it ever done to me? None at all to speak of, so why does my heart leap to hear it?
Many worthy questions, to be sure. The school is not quite deserted. A solitary child, neglected by his friends, is left there still.
I know it. There it stands, a solid mansion of dull red brick, with bell and a little cupola on the roof. A large house full of broken fortunes. Nor is it any more welcoming within. Oh, no, down those dreary halls one finds only cold and vast rooms poorly furnished. Yes, here we are. There was always that earthy savor in the air, a chilly bareness to the place, the perfect wordless sense of too much getting up by candlelight and not enough to eat.
At one of these bare, melancholy rooms, a lonely boy was reading near a feeble fire, and Scrooge sat down upon a stool beside him and wept to see his poor, forgotten self as he used to be.
Spirit, you have brought me here to ruin, for I feel all about me in this somber scene is designed as a softening influence upon my heart. My tears have never fallen so freely. What weakness have you brought about in me?
I perceive no weakness to be found here. I see a boy, intent upon his reading, a boy of great imagination, who felt the only world to have earned his affection and attention was one of imagination. And look at what strength that imagination can muster.
Suddenly a man in foreign garments, wonderfully real and distinct to look at, stood outside the window, with an axe stuck in his belt, and leading by the bridle a mule laden with wood.
Why, it's Ali Baba. It's dear old honest Ali Baba. Yes, I know. One Christmas time, when yonder solitary child was left here all alone, he did come to see me for the first time, just like that. Poor boy. Oh, and there's the parrot. Green body and yellow tail with a thing like lettuce growing out of the top of his head. There he is. Poor Robinson Crusoe, he called him when he came around again after sailing round the island. Poor Robin Crusoe. Where have you been, Robin Crusoe? The man thought he was dreaming, but he wasn't. It was the parrot, you know. There goes Friday running for his life to Little Creek. My, what a poor boy. You know, I wish, but no, it's too late now.
What is the matter?
Nothing. Nothing. There was a boy singing a Christmas carol at my door last night. I should have liked to have given him something. That's all.
A pleasant thought, though not sweeter than action might have been. Let us see another Christmas.
Scrooge's younger self grew larger at the words, and the room became a little darker and more dirty. The panels shrunk, the windows cracked, fragments of plaster fell out of the ceiling. But how all this was brought about, Scrooge knew no more than you do. He only knew that it was quite correct, that everything had happened so, that there he was, alone again, when all the other boys had gone home for the jolly holidays. He was not reading now, but walking up and down despairingly.
Spirit, I beg you, not another.
The old door opened, and a little girl much younger than the boy came darting in, and putting her arms around his neck, kissed his cheeks.
Dear, dear brother, such news! I have come to bring you home, brother. To bring you home, home, home!
Home, little fan?
Yes, home, for good and all. Home forever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be. That home's like heaven. He spoke so gently to me one dear night when I was going to bed that I was not afraid to ask him once more if you might come home. And he said, yes, you should, and sent me in a coach to bring you. And you're to be your own man, and are never to come back here. But first we're to be together all the Christmas long and have the merriest time in the world.
You have grown so while I was gone, little fan. Yet so little she was that day. Look, how hard she had to stretch to reach even my forehead. Oh, little fan.
Bring down Master Scrooge's box there.
In the hall appeared the schoolmaster himself, who glared on Master Scrooge with a ferocious condescension, and threw him into a dreadful state of mind by shaking hands with him. Master Scrooge's trunk being quickly tied onto the top of the carriage, the children bade the schoolmaster goodbye right willingly, and getting into it, drove gaily down the garden sweep, the quick wheels dashing the hoar-frost and snow from off the dark leaves of the evergreens like spray.
Sweet little sister.
Always a delicate creature, whom a breath might have withered, but she had a large heart.
So she had. You're right. I will not gainsay it, Spirit. God forbid.
She lived into womanhood, and had, as I think, children before she passed.
One child.
True. Your nephew.
Yes.
Although they had but that moment left the school behind them, they were now in the busy thoroughfares of a city, where shadowy passengers passed and repassed, where shadowy carts and coaches battled for the way, and all the strife and tumult of a real city were. It was made plain enough by the dressing of the shops, that here too it was Christmas time again, but it was evening and the streets were lighted up.
This warehouse here, do you know it?
Know it? I was apprenticed here.
They went in, and Scrooge beamed with excitement at the sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig, sitting behind such a high desk that if he had been 2 inches taller, he might have knocked his head against the ceiling.
Why, it's old Fezziwig. Bless his heart. It's Fezziwig alive again.
Ah, the time is finally upon us. Down we go. Off we go. Yo-ho there, Ebenezer, Richard.
Scrooge's former self, now a grown young man, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow apprentice.
Hi-li-ho! Ha ha ha! Clear away, my lads, and let's have lots of room here. Hi-li-ho, Dick. Sprightly now, Ebenezer. Clear away. There's nothing here that can't be cleared away for Christmas. Every movable packed off as if dismissed from public life forevermore. Sweep and wax the floor. Trim the lamps, lads, and heap more fuel upon the fire.
Here's 2 lads that don't need telling twice where Christmas is concerned.
And here you are, my love. One vast, substantial smile as ever. And where are my lovable daughters 3?
Fawning over the fiddler, I found. He's tuning 2 rooms over, and it sounds like 50 stomach aches. Oh, but to see them swoon over his playing. They've already broken the 6 young hearts of the men they've invited.
Once the dancing begins, my dear, I fear our 3 lovely daughters are apt to break every heart in the place. There we are, my lads. We've made it a warehouse no more, snug and warm, dry and bright a ballroom as any would desire to see upon this winter's night. Let's bring all in to see, shall we?
He speaks the truth. As surely as I know every soul coming through the door, I know none ever felt more at home than at a Fezziwig party. There's the 3 young Miss Fezziwigs, broken hearts in tow. There's the housemaid, her cousin, the baker. There's the cook with the milkman. Here comes the boy from over the way. You know, he was suspected of not having board enough from his master.
Surely your memory proves prodigious when you feel there is some sport or gain to it. But your memory for the joys of your past, for the friends you held dear at these parties, how does that part of these shadows serve you?
Scrooge scoffed the question away as the dancing began, to the tune of the lone fiddle who had established himself as an orchestra from atop Fezziwig's prodigious desk. Away they all went, 20 couple at once, hands half round and back again the other way, down the middle and up again, round and round in various stages of affectionate grouping. Old couple always turning up in the wrong place, new couple starting off again as soon as they got there. All top couples at last, and not a bottom one to help them.
Well done! On to the next, dear fiddler. Someone, dedicate yourself to our musician's side and make yourself sure he has all the needs to play throughout the night. We will grease the wheels of his talent with any libations he needs.
There were more dances, and there were childish games, and more dances, and there was cake, and there was a great piece of cold roast, and there were mince pies, and there was plenty of beer. But the great effect of the evening came after the roast and cakes, when the fiddler, an artful dog, mind, the sort of man who knew his business better than you or I could have told it to him, struck up Sir Roger de Coverley. Then old Fezziwig stood out to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig. Top couple, too, with a good stiff piece of work cut out for them, with 3 or 4 and 20 other pair of partners, people who were not to be trifled with, people who would dance and had no notion of walking. During the whole time of this scene, Scrooge had acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul were in it, and with his former self. He corroborated everything, remembered everything, enjoyed everything, and underwent the strangest agitation. He clapped and jigged along in place, and had eyes only for the remembered dances of his youth, while the spirit beside him had eyes only for him.
Look at them round, watch them spin. If there were twice as many, 4 times on the floor, the old Fezziwigs would still be a match for them all. You can't predict at any given time what will become of them next.
When old Fezziwig and Mrs. Fezziwig had gone all through the dance, advance and retire, both hands to your partner, bow and curtsy, corkscrew, thread the needle, and back again to your place, Fezziwig cut so deftly that he appeared to wink with his legs, and came upon his feet again without a stagger. When the clock struck 11, the domestic ball broke up. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their stations, one on either side of the door, and shaking hands with every person individually as he or she went out.
Yes, oh yes, my daughter is single, thank you, yes. I say, we made quite a night of things, Ebenezer Richard. Yes, not a face left fallen. The merriest of Christmases to you both, my lads.
And thus the lads were left to their beds, which were under a counter in the back shop. It was not until now, when the bright faces of his former self and Dick were turned from them, that Scrooge remembered the ghost, and became conscious that it was looking full upon him, while the light upon its head burnt very clear.
Spirit, to see this all again as if to be there truly. That was
a small matter, too small to make these silly folks so full of gratitude.
Small?
Listen to your own self a moment.
Fezziwig's mince is truly second to none, and wherever did they find that fiddler? The man was a devil of music, a solitary...
Why is it not a small thing? He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money. 3 or 4, perhaps. Is that so much that he deserves this praise?
It isn't that. It isn't that, Spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. Say that his power lies in words and looks, in things so slight and insignificant that it is impossible to add and count them up. What then? The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it costs a fortune.
What is the matter?
Nothing particular.
Something surely is, I think.
No, I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now. That's all.
His former self turned down the lamps as he gave utterance to the wish, and Scrooge and the ghost again stood side by side in the open air.
My time grows short. Quick.
Again Scrooge saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of life. His face had not the harsh and rigid lines of later years, but it had begun to wear the signs of care and avarice. There was an eager, greedy, restless motion in the eye, which showed the passion that had taken root, and where the shadow of the growing tree would fall. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl in a mourning dress. In her eyes there were tears, which sparkled in the light that shone out of the ghost of Christmas past.
It matters little to you, very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if it can cheer and comfort you in time to come, as I would have tried to do, I have no just cause to grieve.
What idol has displaced you?
A golden one.
This is the even-handed dealing of the world. There is nothing on which it is as hard as poverty, and there is nothing it professes to condemn with such severity as the pursuit of wealth.
You fear the world too much. All other hopes have merged into the hope of being beyond the chance of its sordid reproach. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one until the master passion, monetary gain, engrosses you. Have I not?
What then? Even if I have grown so much wiser, what then? I am not changed towards you. Am I?
Our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be so, until, in good season, we could improve our worldly fortune by our patient industry. You are changed. When it was made, you were another man.
I was a boy.
Your own feeling tells you that you were not what you are. I am. That which promised happiness when we were one in heart is fraught with misery now that we are two. How often and how keenly I have thought of this, I will not say. It is enough that I have thought of it, and can release you.
Have I ever sought release?
In words? No, never.
In what then?
In a changed nature, in an altered spirit, and another atmosphere of life, another hope as its great end, in everything that makes my love of any worth or value in your sight. If this had never been between us, then tell me, would you seek me out and try to win me now? No.
You think not?
But if you were free, today, tomorrow, yesterday, can even I believe that you would choose a girl without a dowry? You, who in your very confidence with her weigh everything by monetary gain. Or, in choosing her, do I not know that your repentance and regret would surely follow? I do. And I release you, with a full heart, for the love of him you once were. You may have pain in this. The memory of what is past half makes me hope you will. A very, very brief time later, and you will dismiss the recollection of it gladly as an unprofitable dream from which it happened, well, that you have awoken. May you be happy in the life you have chosen.
She left him, and they parted.
Oh, spirit, show me no more. Conduct me home. Why do you delight to torture me?
One shadow more.
No more, no more. I don't wish to see it. Show me no more.
But the relentless ghost held him fast in both arms, and forced him to observe what happened next. They were in another scene and place, a room not very large or handsome, but full of comfort. Near to the winter fire sat a beautiful young girl, so like that last that Scrooge believed it was the same, until he saw Belle, now a comely matron, sitting opposite her daughter. There were more children in the room than Scrooge in his agitated state of mind could count. Every child was conducting itself like 40. The consequences were uproarious beyond belief, but no one seemed to care. On the contrary, the mother and daughter laughed heartily and enjoyed it very much. Scrooge found himself detached from the tumult of the shadows around him, lost in the face of the well-mannered girl who looked so much like her mother.
No thought of yours is hidden from me. To give it voice is to set it free.
Oh, Spirit. I do confess, when I think that such another creature, quite as graceful and as full of promise, might have called me father, and been a sort of springtime in the haggard winter of my life. I should have liked to have had the lightest claim to fatherhood, and to have been man enough to know the value of it.
Such a rush immediately ensued at the knocking that she was borne towards it at the center of the flushed and boisterous group, just in time to greet the father, who came home attended by a man laden with Christmas toys and presents.
Spirit, if you truly care for my welfare, spare me this. The shouts of wonder and delight with every package, the joy and gratitude and ecstasy, they are all indescribable alike. And to know it might have been mine, directed at my actions by a family of my own, is torment to my heart, a deepest regret that I will hold on forever.
The ghost seemed not to hear Scrooge's plea, and they observed the scene for some time still. It is enough by degrees to say that the children and their emotions got out of the parlor, and by one stair at a time up to the top of the house, where they went to bed and so subsided. And now Scrooge looked on more attentively than ever, when the father of the house, having his daughter leaning fondly on him, sat down with her and her mother at his own fireside.
Bill, I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon.
Mr. Scrooge?
Mr. Scrooge it was. I passed his office window and it was not shut up and he had a candle inside. I could scarcely help seeing him. His partner lies upon the point of death, I hear, and there he sat alone.
Spirit, remove me from this place.
I told you these were shadows of the things that have been. They are what they are. Do not blame me.
Remove me. I cannot bear it.
He turned upon the ghost, and seeing that it looked upon him with a face, in which, in some strange way, there were fragments of all the faces it had shown him, wrestled with it.
Leave me! Take me back! Haunt me no longer!
In the struggle, Scrooge observed that the ghost's light was burning high and bright, and dimly connecting that with its influence over him, and that it was offering no visible resistance, he seized the extinguisher cap, and by a sudden action pressed it down upon the spirit's head. The spirit dropped beneath it so that the extinguisher covered its whole form, but though Scrooge pressed down with all his force, he could not hide the light, which streamed from under it in an unbroken flood upon the ground.
Leave me, Spirit! Take me back! Oh, heaven, take me back! Haunt me, no longer.
Scrooge was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further, of being in his own bedroom. He had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep. There will now be a 10-minute intermission. Thank you.
1:45. In the right nick of time for holding a conference with the second messenger dispatched to me by Marley's intervention. Let me put the curtains back with my own hands this time. I grow colder by the moment, wondering which one of the spectre will draw themselves. This spirit I will challenge. At the moment of their appearance, they will not rattle my nerves so. I must make ready for a good broad field of strange appearances, so that nothing between a baby and a rhinoceros will astonish me very much.
But he was not by any means prepared for nothing. And consequently, when the bell struck 1, a blaze of ruddy light streamed upon his bed, but no shape appeared. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour went by, yet nothing came. Being only light, this was more alarming than a dozen ghosts, as he was powerless to make out what it meant. He was taken with a violent fit of trembling, and was apprehensive that he might be, at that very moment, an interesting case of spontaneous combustion, without having the consolation of knowing it.
Oh, Ebenezer, consider clearly. Perhaps the source and secret of this ghostly light might be in the adjoining room. Yes, indeed. Surprising not at all to think these ghosts would have their own fashions of apparition.
Ebenezer Scrooge! Come in! Come in!
The room he surveyed was his own, there was no doubt about that, but it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceiling were so hung with living green that it looked a perfect grove, from every part of which bright gleaming berries glistened. The crisp leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflected back the light, as if so many little mirrors had been scattered there. And such a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney that hearth had never known in Scrooge's time, or Marley's, or for many and many a winter season gone. Heaped upon the floor, to form a kind of throne, were turkeys, suckling pigs, long wreaths of sausages, mince pies, plum puddings, red-hot chestnuts, cherry-cheeked apples, luscious pears, and seething bowls of punch that made the chamber dim with their delicious steam. In easy state upon this couch there sat a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch, in shape not unlike a horn of plenty. The giant held it up high to shed its light on Scrooge as he came peeping round the door.
Come in, and know me better, man. I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me.
Scrooge reverently did so. The spirit was clothed in one simple green robe, or mantle bordered with white fur. This garment hung so loosely on the figure that its capacious breast was bare, as if disdaining to be concealed by any artifice. Its feet were also bare, and on its head it wore only a holly wreath, set here and there with shining icicles. Its dark brown curls were long and free as its genial face, its sparkling eye, its cheery voice, its unconstrained demeanor, and its joyful air. Girded round its middle was an antique scabbard, but no sword was in it, and the ancient sheath was eaten up with rust.
You have never seen the like of me before?
Never.
Have you never walked forth with any of my elder brothers born in these later years?
I don't think I have. I'm afraid I have not. Have you had many brothers, Spirit?
More than 1,800.
A tremendous family to provide for. Imagine the grocery bills. Spirit, conduct me where you will. I went forth last night on compulsion, and I learnt a lesson which is working now. Tonight, if you have aught to teach me, let me profit by it.
Touch my robe.
Scrooge did as he was told and held it fast. Holly, mistletoe, red berries, ivy, turkeys, pigs, sausages, pies, puddings, fruit, and punch all vanished instantly. So did the room, the fire, the ruddy glow, the hour of night, and they stood in the city streets on Christmas morning. The sky was gloomy, and the shortest streets were choked up with a dingy mist, half-thawed, half-frozen showers of sooty atoms, as if all the chimneys in Great Britain had caught fire and were blazing away to their dear hearts' content. There was nothing very cheerful in the climate or the town, and yet there was an air of cheerfulness that the weather and the soot could not tarnish. Soon the steeples called all Christians to church and chapel, and away they came, flocking through the streets in their best clothes and with their gayest faces. And at the same time, there emerged from scores of by-streets, lanes, and nameless turnings innumerable people carrying their covered dinners to the bakers' shops. The Spirit stood with Scrooge beside him in a baker's doorway, and taking off the covers as these poor folk passed, sprinkled incense on their dinners from his torch. And it was a very uncommon kind of torch, for once or twice when there were angry words between some dinner carriers who had jostled each other, he shed a few drops of water on them from it, and their good humor was restored directly.
I say, Spirit, is there a peculiar flavor in what you sprinkle from your torch?
There is. My own.
Would it apply to any kind of dinner on this day?
Oh, to any kindly given. To a poor one most.
Why to a poor one most?
Because a poor dinner needs it most.
Spirit, I wonder that of you. Of all the beings in the many worlds about us, should desire to cramp these people's opportunities of innocent enjoyment.
I?
You would deprive them of their means of dining every 7th day, often the only day which they can be said to dine at all. Wouldn't you?
I?
You seek to close these places on the 7th day, and it comes to the same thing.
I seek?
Forgive me if I am wrong. It has been done in your name, or at least in that of your family.
There are some upon this earth of yours who lay claim to know us, and who do their deeds of passion, pride, ill will, hatred, envy, bigotry, and selfishness in our name. They are as strange to us, and all our kith and kin, as if they had never lived. Remember that, and charge their doings on themselves, not us.
I will, Spirit. I swear I will remember it.
They went on invisibly into the suburbs of the town. It was a remarkable quality of the ghost that, notwithstanding his gigantic size, he could accommodate himself to any place with ease, and that he stood beneath a low roof quite as gracefully as he might have done in any lofty hall. And perhaps it was the pleasure the good Spirit had in showing off this power of his, or else it was his own kind, generous, and hardy nature, and his sympathy with all poor men, that led him straight to the house of Scrooge's clerk. And on the threshold of the door the Spirit smiled, and stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling with the sprinkling of his torch.
Huh. To think of it, Bob gets but 15 bob a week himself, and yet the ghost of Christmas present blessed his 4-room house.
Belinda, dear, help me lay out the tablecloth.
Yes, Mother.
Mrs. Crachit and her daughter Belinda wore their best in dress, poor as it was, but were brave in ribbons for the occasion. As they laid the cloth, Master Peter Crachit came tearing in, only slowing after locking eyes with his mother.
The most wonderful goose, Mother! Earlier I passed the baker's and smelling such sage and onion, I knew it to be ours!
Well, if the turkey hangs there still, whatever has got your precious father then? And your brother, Tiny Tim? They weren't this late last Christmas Day.
Here's Father. I hear him and Tim.
Hurrah! And I can almost smell the goose again.
Why, bless your heart alive, my dears, how late you are.
In came little Bob, the father, with his threadbare clothes darned up and brushed to look seasonable, and Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. Alas for Tiny Tim, he bore a little crutch and had his limbs supported by an iron frame.
Off to the washing, little Crachits. Father's home, so dinner now waits on you lot.
The two young Crachits bustled away Tiny Tim and bore him off into the wash-house, but not before secreting him to the shed in the backyard that he might hear the pudding singing in the copper. The two parental Crachits laughed to see them depart, and then settled into the kind closeness of a rare moment alone together.
How did little Tim behave?
As good as gold. Good as gold and better. He gets thoughtful sitting by himself so much, and thinks these strangest things you ever heard. He told me, coming home, that he hoped people saw him in church, because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see. Tiny Tim is growing strong in hearty love.
Oh, Bob.
Look at you all, clean and shining for Christmas. Here, Tim, your favourite stool.
I can make it myself, Father. Watch.
Uh-oh, Tim, let's have your sister help you. Here now, Belinda.
There, Tim. Cozy? Always cozy here by the fire.
The household fell again into the bustle preceding a feast. Bob turning up his cuffs, as if, poor fellow, they were capable of being made more shabby, compounded some hot mixture in a jug with gin and lemons, and stirred it round and put it on the hob to simmer. Master Peter and Miss Belinda went to fetch the goose, with which they soon returned in such high procession you might have thought a goose the rarest of all birds, a feathered phenomenon, to which a black swan was a matter of course. And in truth it was something very like it in that house. Mrs. Crachit made the gravy hissing hot, Master Peter mashed the potatoes with incredible vigor, Miss Belinda sweetened up the applesauce, Bob took Tiny Tim beside him in a tiny corner at the table. At last the dishes were set on, and grace was said. It was succeeded by a breathless pause as Mrs. Crachit, looking slowly all along the carving knife, prepared to plunge it in the breast. But when she did, and when the long-expected gush of stuffing issued forth, one murmur of delight arose all round the board, and even Tiny Tim, excited by the two young Crachits, beat on the table with the handle of his knife, and feebly cried,
Hurrah!
My love, there never was such a goose. I don't believe there ever was such a goose cooked.
So tender. The flavour.
The size of it. Such a goose.
And its cheapness for all that. Surely to be praised, yet not outdone by the applesauce and mashed potatoes.
Well, how grand is it truly, if the lot of you sit there praising it instead of eating?
It was a sufficient dinner for the whole family, indeed, better than sufficient. Each had their fill and then some, almost dreading the idea of dessert, until Miss Belinda took up the plates to be changed, and everyone's anticipation churned up once more. Mrs. Crachit moved to leave the room alone, mock nerves straining her pretty face to take the pudding up and bring it in.
Suppose it should not be done enough. Suppose it should break in turning out. Suppose somebody should have got over the wall of the backyard and stolen it while we were merry with the goose.
Mother, please, don't tease us. We can nearly smell the cloth from here.
Yes, Mother. With a matter like dessert, please just don't be so...
Choose that next adjective wisely, young master.
Oh, but there's the pudding, not stolen at all.
In half a minute, Mrs. Crachit re-entered, flushed but smiling proudly, with the pudding, like a speckled cannonball, so hard and firm, blazing in half a quartern of ignited brandy, and bedight with Christmas holly stuck into the top.
My dear wife, I regard this fine pudding as the greatest success you may have achieved since our marriage.
Oh, trust, Robert. We're surrounded by my various greatest achievements, who all also seem to enjoy the pudding. In truth, I was nervous, mostly about the quantity of flour.
Not at all. It's a wonderful pudding.
The perfect size for our family as well.
At last the dinner was all done. The cloth was cleared, the hearth swept, and the fire made up. The compound in the jug being tasted and considered perfect, the apples and oranges were put upon the table, and a shovelful of chestnuts on the fire. Then all the Crachit family drew round the hearth, and at Bob Cratchit's elbow stood the family display of glass, 2 tumblers and a custard cup without a handle. These held the hot stuff from the jug, however, as well as golden goblets would have done, and Bob served it out with beaming looks, while the chestnuts on the fire sputtered and cracked noisily.
A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us.
God bless us. God bless us, everyone.
He sat very close to his father's side upon his little stool. Bob held his withered little hand in his, as if he wished to keep the boy always by his side, and dreaded that he might be taken from him.
Spirit, tell me if Tiny Tim will live.
I see a vacant seat in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die.
No, oh, no. Kind spirit, say he will be spared.
If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, none other of my kin will find him here. What then? If he be like to die, he had better do it, and decrease the surplus population.
Scrooge hung his head to hear his own words quoted by the spirit, and was overcome with penitence and grief.
Man, if man you be in heart, not adamant, forbear those wicked words until you have discovered what the true surplus is, and where it is. Will you decide what men shall live, what men shall die? It may be that in the sight of heaven you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child. Oh God, to hear the insect on the leaf pronouncing there is too much life among his hungry brothers in the dust.
Mr. Scrooge.
Bob Cratchit, can you...
I'll give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
The founder of the feast, indeed. I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I hope he'd have a good appetite for it.
My dear, the children. Christmas Day.
It should be Christmas Day, I am sure, on which one drinks to the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you do, poor fellow.
My dear, Christmas Day.
I'll drink to his health, for your sake, and the day's. Not for his. Long life to him. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt.
The children drank the toast after her. It was the first of their proceedings which had no heartiness. Tiny Tim drank it last of all, but he didn't care tuppence for it.
It seems I am the ogre of the family. The mention of my name casts such a dark shadow on the party.
But after the shadow had passed away, they were 10 times merrier than before, from the mere relief of Scrooge the Baleful being done with. They sprang immediately into chatter all at once on a great many things, all of it full of hope and play. And all this time the chestnuts in the jug went round and round, and by the by they had a song. There was nothing of high mark in this. They were not a handsome family, they were not well dressed. Their shoes were far from being waterproof, their clothes were scanty. But they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, and contented with the time. And when they faded, and looked happier yet in the bright sparklings of the spirit's torch at parting, Scrooge had his eye upon them, especially on Tiny Tim, until the last. By this time it was getting dark and snowing pretty heavily, and as Scrooge and the spirit went along the streets, the brightness of the roaring fires in kitchens, parlors, and all sorts of rooms was wonderful. Blessings on it, how the ghost exulted! How it bared its breadth of breast, and opened its capacious palm, and floated on, outpouring, with a generous hand, its bright and harmless mirth on everything within its reach. The very lamplighter who ran on before, dotting the dusky street with specks of light, and who was dressed to spend the evening somewhere, laughed out loudly as the spirit passed, though little kenned the lamplighter that he had any company but Christmas. And now, without a word of warning from the ghost, they stood upon a bleak and desert moor, where monstrous masses of rude stone were cast about, as though it were the burial place of giants. Down in the west, the setting sun had left a streak of fiery red, which glared upon the desolation for an instant like a sullen eye, and frowning lower yet, was lost in the thick gloom of darkest night.
What place is this?
A place where miners live, who labor in the bowels of the earth. But they know me. Here!
From one of the nearby huts, a cheerful company sang. An old man, in a voice that seldom rose above the howling of the wind upon the barren waste, was singing them a Christmas song. It had been a very old song when he was a boy, and from time to time several others all joined in the chorus.
Take my robe once more.
Whither to next, spirit? Oh, not out to sea?
To sea!
Watching behind him, Scrooge saw the last of the land, a frightful range of rocks behind them, and his ears were deafened by the thundering of water as it rolled and roared and raged among the dreadful caverns it had worn and fiercely tried to undermine the earth. Built upon a dismal reef of sunken rocks, on which the waters chafed and dashed, there stood a solitary lighthouse. Great heaps of seaweed clung to its base, and storm birds rose and fell about it, like the waves they skimmed.
Even here, they who keep a watch of this solitary light know me well.
In the tower's interior, a humble fire's light shed out a ray of brightness on the awful sea through the loophole in the thick stone wall. Joining their calloused hands over the rough table at which they sat, the keepers wished each other a Merry Christmas in their can of grog, and one of them, the elder, too, with his face all damaged and scarred with hard weather, as the figurehead of an old ship might be, struck up a sturdy song that was like a gale in itself.
Again, onward! Farther still, far away from any shore!
What's to find of Christmas out there? Spirit, oh mercy!
Above the black and heaving sea, they lighted on a ship. They stood beside the helmsman at the wheel, the lookout in the bow, the officers who had the watch, dark, ghostly figures in their several stations. But every man among them hummed a Christmas tune, or had a Christmas thought, or spoke below his breath to his companion of some bygone Christmas day with homeward hopes belonging to it. And every man on board, waking or sleeping, good or bad, had had a kinder word for another on that day than on any day in the year, and had remembered those he cared for at a distance, and had known that they delighted to remember him.
Oh, what a great and solemn thing it is to move through this lonely darkness over an unknown abyss, to see depths or secrets as profound as death. And yet still here, there is Christmas feeling to be found.
The great surprise of laughter to Scrooge was much outweighed by the surprise of recognizing it as his own nephew's, and again by the surprise of finding himself in a bright, dry, gleaming room. Scrooge's niece by marriage laughed as heartily as he, and their assembled friends, being not a bit behindhand, roared out all at once. The spirit stood smiling by Scrooge's side, looking at Fred with approving affability.
If you should happen, by any unlikely chance, to ever meet a man more blessed in a laugh than your nephew, I should like to know him too. Introduce him to me, and I'll cultivate his acquaintance. Oh, yes. While there is infection and disease and sorrow, there is nothing in the world so irresistibly contagious as laughter and good humor.
No, I suppose not.
And he said that Christmas was a humbug. As I live. He believed it too.
More shame for him, Fred.
He's a comical old fellow, that's the truth. And not so pleasant as he might be. However, his offences carry their own punishment, and I have nothing to say against him.
I'm sure he is very rich, Fred. At least you always tell me so.
What of that, my dear? His wealth is of no use to him. He won't do any good with it. He won't make himself comfortable with it. He hasn't the satisfaction of thinking that he's ever going to benefit us with it.
I have no patience with him.
Oh, I have. I'm sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers by his ill whims? Himself, always. Here, he takes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come dine with us. What's the consequence? He won't lose much of dinner.
Indeed, I think he loses a very good dinner.
Well, I'm very glad to hear it, because I haven't great faith in these young housekeepers. What do you say, friends? I was only going to say that the consequence of his taking a dislike to us and not making merry with us is, as I think, that he loses some pleasant moments, which he could do no harm. I am sure he can lose pleasanter companions than he can find in his own thoughts, either in his mouldy old office or his dusty chambers. I mean to give him the same chance every year, whether he likes it or not, for I pity him. He may rail at Christmas till he dies, but he can't help thinking better of it if I go there year after year in good temper, saying, "Uncle Scrooge, how are you?" If only it puts him in the vein to leave his poor clerk £50. That's at least something. And I think I shook him yesterday. I didn't think there was humor in my thinking.
But there is, Fred, in the very notion of shaking the old crumbling face of Mount Scrooge.
After tea, they had some music, for they were a musical family and knew what they were about when they sung a glee or a catch, I can assure you. Scrooge's niece played well upon the harp, and played among other tunes a simple little air.
That tune?
Yes?
I've only recently been reminded. It was a favorite of my sister's, Fred's mother. Oh, Fan, if I could have listened to it often, remembered it all these years, I might have cultivated some kindness of life for my own happiness and that of others. I might not have needed such divine interventions as yours, Spirit.
After a while, they played at forfeits and other quick, silly games with similarly silly punishments for a loser, for it is good to be children sometimes, and never better than at Christmas, when its mighty founder was a child himself. There might have been 20 people there, young and old, but they all played, and so did Scrooge, for wholly forgetting in the interest he had in what was going on, and that his voice made no sound in their ears, he sometimes came out with his guess quite loud, and very often guessed quite right, too, for the sharpest needle warranted not to cut in the eye was not sharper than Scrooge, blunt as he took it in his head to be.
Oh, Spirit, I know you must want to be off again, and by the look on your own countenance, you admit the pleasure you take in this fact. I am in such a fanciful mood with these games. Might we stay until the guests depart?
Though I admit your mood to be agreeable, That cannot be done. We must move onward.
Friends, have you all ever played Yes and No?
And here is a new game. 1/2 hour, Spirit, please. 30 minutes more.
To play, I have to think of something, and the rest of you must find out what. The catch being I can only answer questions with yes or no. I have it fast in my mind now. Begin.
Is it a kind of vegetable?
No.
An animal, then?
Yes.
A very savage or altogether disagreeable animal.
Oh, yes.
Does it growl or grunt when angered?
Sometimes, yes.
It's a bear.
Does it thrive in our climate?
For such a sharp question, my love, I will break my own rule and tell you. It lives here in London.
Leave it to my nephew to cheat his own game for love. Bah, a good game it is, though, besides.
But then, surely it doesn't walk about the streets.
No.
Yes, indeed it does.
Is it in a circus?
As part of a show? Or a menagerie?
Not ever in what I've seen.
Is it a devil, like Spring-Heel Jack?
Oh,
bah, humbug.
No, but I suppose it's not far off the mark.
A tiger, then?
No.
Is it not a bear?
An ass?
Well, yes and no, but mostly no.
Definitely a bear.
A pig?
I suppose perhaps, although I rarely dine with this creature.
Oh, I think it's...
Oh, Fred, you devil! I think I know what it is. I do!
What is it, my love?
It's your Uncle Scrooge!
It certainly is. Well done. He has given us plenty of merriment, I'm sure. I would be ungrateful not to drink to his health. Here is a glass of mulled wine, ready to our hand at the moment, and I say, Uncle Scrooge. Well, Uncle Scrooge. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to the old man, wherever he is.
Yes.
He wouldn't take a Merry Christmas from me, but he may have it, nevertheless. Uncle Scrooge.
Thank you. Thank you all.
The ghost had not given Scrooge the time for a longer inaudible goodbye, for off again they were on their travels. Much they saw, and far they went, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. In almshouse, hospital, and jail, in misery's every refuge, where vain man in his little brief authority had not made fast the door and barred the spirit out, he left his blessing, and taught Scrooge his precepts.
Spirit, although this long night has certainly surpassed its usual schedule, I have seen so much. Your powers are manifold, Spirit. When you stood beside sick beds, the sick were cheerful. When you were with travelers, they were close to home, by poverty, and it was rich. I want to see so much more, Great Spirit, to learn more. But I find it strange. Much time has passed, yes, and though my own form has not changed or grown weary, your own. How can a spirit of such power turn so quickly gray and sickly? Are spirits' lives so short?
My life upon this globe is very brief. It ends tonight, on the stroke of 12.
Tonight?
Tonight at midnight. Hark! The time is drawing near.
In that case, dear spirit, forgive me if I am not justified in what I ask. But I have waited and cannot now wait longer. I see something strange and not belonging to yourself, protruding from your skirts. Is it a foot or a claw?
It might be a claw for the flesh there is upon it. Look here. Oh, man, look here. Look, look, down here.
From the foldings of its robe, it brought 2 children, wretched, abject, frightful, hideous, miserable. They knelt down at its feet and clung upon the outside of its garment. They were a boy and a girl, meager, ragged, scowling, wolfish, but prostrate, too, in their humility. Where graceful youth should have filled their features out and touched them with its fresh tints, a stale and shriveled hand, like that of age, had pinched and twisted them and pulled them into shreds. Where angels might have sat enthroned, devils lurked and glared out menacing. No change, no degradation, no perversion of humanity in any grade, through all the mysteries of wonderful creation, has monsters half so horrible and dread.
Why? What fine are they yours, spirit?
They are man's, and they cling to me, appealing from their fathers. This boy is ignorance. This girl is want. Beware them both, and all of their degree. But most of all beware this boy, for on his brow I see that written which is doom, unless the writing be erased. Deny it. Slander those who tell it ye. Admit it for your factious purposes, and make it worse. And bide the end.
Have they no refuge or resource?
Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses?
But Spirit, don't leave me with only my own words. Oh. What was the last ghost's hour, dear Marley? Ah!
Lifting up his eyes, Scrooge beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground towards him. Scrooge bent down upon his knee as the phantom approached, for in the very air through which this spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. It was shrouded in a deep black garment, which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible, save one outstretched hand. But for this, it would have been difficult to detach its figure from the night, and separate it from the darkness by which it was surrounded. Its stately and mysterious presence filled Scrooge with a solemn dread. He knew no more, for the spirit neither spoke nor moved.
I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come.
The spirit answered not aloud, but pointed onward with its hand.
You are about to show me the shadows of the things that have not happened, but will happen in the time before us. Is that so, Spirit?
The upper portion of the garment was contracted for an instant in its folds, as if the spirit had inclined its head. That was the only answer he received.
Ah, well then, please forgive me, Spirit. I thought myself well used to ghostly company by this time, but... A moment, please. Such a presence. I can hardly stand, much less follow, and to know behind that dusky shroud, doubtless ghostly eyes fix upon me intently, though all I see with mine own is the spectral hand and one great heap of black. Ghost of the future, I fear you more than any specter I have seen. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear your company and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me?
Follow.
Lead on. Lead on. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me, I know. Lead on, spirit.
The phantom moved away, and as Scrooge followed in the shadow of its dress, the shadow bore him aloft, he thought, and carried him along. They scarcely seemed to enter the city, for the city rather seemed to spring up about them and encompass them of its own act. But there they were, in the heart of it, amongst the merchants who hurried up and down and conversed in groups and looked at their watches and trifled thoughtfully with their great gold seals, and so forth, as Scrooge had seen them often. The spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen.
Listen.
What, Yes.
I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead.
When did he die?
Last night, I believe.
Well, old Scratch has got his own at last.
Why? What was the matter with him? I thought he'd never die.
God knows.
What has he done with his money?
I haven't heard. Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me, that's all I know.
It's likely to be a very cheap funeral, for upon my life I don't know of anybody to go to it. Suppose we make a party and volunteer.
I don't mind going, if a lunch is provided, but I must be fed if I make one.
Well, I am the most disinterested among you, after all, for I never eat lunch. But I'll offer to go if anybody else will. When I come to think of it, I'm not at all sure that I wasn't his most particular.
I know those men, Spirit. They are men of business, very wealthy, and of great importance. I have made a point, always, of standing well in their esteem. In a business point of view, that is. I suppose quite strictly in a business point of view. But I'm afraid I do not.
The phantom glided on into a street, quiet and dark, with its outstretched hand saying all that Scrooge needed to understand. He fancied from the turn of that hand, and the situation of the hood, that the unseen eyes were looking at him keenly. It made him shudder and feel very cold.
Spirit, I can think of no one I know whose situation this might be, or what I am meant to learn from it. I thought perhaps the death of Marley would elicit such a reaction, but as your providence is not the past, that was not the case. Perhaps, if I could see my own self of the future, that might render the answer to these riddles much easier. There is something I am lacking which might be found there.
The phantom neither turned, nor stopped, nor pivoted the stone stillness with which it pointed towards their destination. They left the busy scene, and went into an obscure part of the town, where Scrooge had never visited before, although he recognized its situation and its bad repute. The ways were foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched, alleys and archways, like so many cesspools, disgorged their offenses of smell and dirt and life upon the straggling streets, and the whole quarter reeked with filth and misery. Far in this den of infamous resort there was a low-browed, beetling shop below a penthouse roof, where iron, old rags, bottles, and bones were bought. Upon the floor within were piled up heaps of rusty keys, nails, chains, hinges, weights, and refuse iron of all kinds. Secrets that few would like to scrutinize were bred and hidden in mountains of unseemly rags, masses of corrupted fat, and sepulchres of bones. Sitting in among the wares he dealt in, by a charcoal stove made of old bricks, was a gray-haired rascal, nearly 70 years of age, who had screened himself from the cold air without by a curtaining of miscellaneous tatters hung upon a line, and smoked his pipe in all the luxury of calm retirement. Scrooge and the Phantom came into the presence of this man, just as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop. But she had scarcely entered when another woman, similarly laden, came in too, and she was closely followed by a third woman in faded black, who was no less startled by the sight of them than they had been upon the recognition of each other. After a short period of blank astonishment, in which the old man with the pipe had joined them, they all three burst into a laugh, which the old man interrupted with a sputtering laugh of his own.
Okay, let the charwoman be the first. Let the laundress alone to be the second. And let the mortician's assistant alone to be the third. Look, here's a chance. If you haven't all three met here without meaning it, come into the parlour. Stop till I shut the door of the shop. How it shrieks! There aren't such a rusty bit of metal in the place as its own hinges, I believe. And I'm sure there's no such old bones here as mine. All of us are familiar faces, no? Come on into the parlour.
What odds then? What odds, Mrs. Dilber? Every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did.
That's true indeed. No man more so.
Why then, don't stand staring as if you was afraid, woman. Who's the wiser and who's the worst for the loss of a few things such as these? Not a dead man, I suppose.
No, indeed.
If he wanted to keep 'em after he was dead, wicked old screw, why wasn't he natural in his lifetime? And if he had been, he'd have somebody to look after him when he was struck with death, instead of lying, gasping out his last there, all alone by himself.
It's the truest word that ever was spoke. Why, it's a judgment on him.
I wish it was a little heavier judgment, and it would have been if I could have laid my hands on anything else.
Here you are. Open that bundle, old Joe, and let me know what the value is. Speak it plain. I'm not afraid to be the first, nor afraid for them to see it. We know pretty well that we were all helping ourselves before we met here, I believe. It's no sin. Open the bundle, Joe.
The woman in faded black then produced her plunder. It was not extensive, a seal or two, a pencil case, a pair of sleeve buttons, and a brooch of no great value were all. They were severally examined and appraised by old Joe, who chalked the sums he was disposed to give for each upon the wall, and added them up into a total where he found there was nothing more to come.
That's your account, and I wouldn't give another 6p if it was to be boiled for not doing it. Okay, who's next?
Mrs. Dilber was next. Sheets and towels, a little wearing apparel, 2 old-fashioned silver teaspoons, a pair of silver tongs, and a few boots. Her account was stated on the wall in the same manner.
And now undo my bundle, Joe.
Joe went down on his knees for the greater convenience of opening it, and having unfastened a great many knots, dragged out a large and heavy roll of some dark stuff.
What do you call this? Bed curtains?
Ah, bed curtains.
You don't mean to say you took 'em down, rings and all, with 'em lying there?
Yes, I do. Why not?
You were born to make your fortune, and you'll certainly do it.
I certainly shan't hold my hand when I can get anything in by reaching it out. For the sake of such a man he was, I promise you, Joe. Don't drop that oil upon the blankets now.
His blankets?
Who else's do you think? He isn't likely to take gold without him, I dare say.
I hope he didn't die of anything catching, eh?
Don't be afraid of that. I ain't so fond of his company that I'd loiter about him for such things if he did. Ah, you may look through that shirt till your eyes ache. You won't find a hole in it, nor a threadbare place. It's the best he had, and a fine one, too. They'd have wasted it if it wasn't for me.
What do you call wasted of it?
Putting it on him to be buried in, to be sure. Somebody was fool enough to do it. I took it off him again. If calico ain't good enough for such a purpose, it isn't good enough for anything. It's quite as becoming to the body. He can't look uglier than he did in that one.
It's true.
Well, here you are then. For all your sinner's work, here's a sinner's pay.
This is the end of it, you see. He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive to profit us when he was dead.
Spirit, I see. The case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life trends that way now. Merciful heavens, what is this? I am filled with such disgust which could hardly be greater, though they had been obscene demons marketing the corpse itself.
He recoiled in terror, for the scene had changed, and now he almost touched a bed. A bare, uncurtained bed on which, beneath a ragged sheet, there lay a something covered up, which, though it was dumb, announced itself in awful language. The room was very dark, too dark to be observed with any accuracy, though Scrooge glanced round it in obedience to a secret impulse, anxious to know what kind of room it was. A pale light, rising in the outer air, fell straight upon the bed, and on it, plundered and bereft, unwatched, unwept, uncared for, was the body of this man. Scrooge glanced towards the phantom. Its steady hand was pointed to the head. The cover was so carelessly adjusted that the slightest raising of it, the motion of a finger on Scrooge's part, would have disclosed the face. He thought of it, felt how easy it would be to do, and longed to do it, but had no more power to withdraw the veil than to dismiss the spectre at his side.
If this man could be raised up now, what would be his foremost thoughts? Avarice, hard dealing, griping cares, they have brought him to a rich end, truly. Spirit, this is a fearful place. In leaving it, I shall not leave its lesson, trust me. Let us go.
Look.
I understand you, and I would do it if I could. But I have not the power, Spirit. I have not the power.
Look.
If there is any person in the town who feels emotion caused by this man's death, show that person to me, Spirit. I beseech you.
The phantom spread its dark robe before him for a moment like a wing, and then, withdrawing it, revealed a room by daylight, where a mother and her children were. She was expecting someone, and with anxious eagerness, for she walked up and down the room, started at every sound, looked out from the window, glanced at the clock, tried but in vain to work with her needle, and could hardly bear the voices of the children in their play. At length the long-expected knock was heard. She hurried to the door and met her husband, a man whose face was careworn and depressed, though he was young. There was a remarkable expression in it now, a kind of serious delight of which he felt ashamed, and which he struggled to repress.
Oh, what news? By that look I know there is to be some, but is it good or bad?
Bad.
We are quite ruined.
No. There is hope yet, Caroline.
If he relents, there is. Nothing is past hope if such a miracle has happened.
He's past relenting. He's dead.
Lord, I pray forgiveness for these moments of thankfulness at another creature's death, but it is all my soul can feel at such news. I am sorry, but this is the first emotion of my heart.
What the half-drunken woman whom I told you of last night said to me when I tried to see him and obtain a week's delay, and what I thought was a mere excuse to avoid me, turns out to have been quite true. He was not only very ill, but dying then.
To whom will our debt be transferred?
I don't know. But before that time, we should be ready with the money. And even though we were not, it would be a bad fortune indeed to find so merciless a creditor in his successor. We may sleep tonight with light hearts, Caroline.
Yes, soften it as they would, their hearts were lighter. The children's faces, hushed and clustered round to hear what they so little understood, were brighter, and it was a happier house for this man's death. The only emotion that the ghost could show him caused by the event was one of pleasure.
Let me see some tenderness connected with the death spirit. For if not, that dark chamber will haunt me far longer than any singular spectre.
The ghost conducted him through several streets familiar to his feet, and as they went along, Scrooge looked here and there to find himself, but nowhere was he to be seen. They entered poor Bob Crachit's house, the dwelling he had visited before, and found the mother and children seated round the fire. Quiet, very quiet. Peter sat in a corner and had a book before him. The mother and her daughter were engaged in sewing, but surely they were very quiet.
And he took a child and set him in the midst of them. And when he had taken them in his arms...
This fabric, the color hurts my eyes.
The color? Oh, poor Tiny Tim.
They're better now again. It makes them weak by candlelight, and I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home. For the world. It must be near his time.
Past it, rather. But I think he has walked a little slower than he used these last few evenings, Mother.
I have known him walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder, very fast indeed.
And so have I. Often.
And so have I.
But he was very light to carry, and his father loved him so that it was no trouble. No trouble. There's your father at the door.
His tea was ready for him on the hob, and they all tried who should help him to it most. Then the two young Crachits wrapped their thin arms round their seated father, pressing their ruddy cheeks against his face.
Oh, don't be grieved,
Don't mind
Father.
it, Father.
Of course not, my loves. Why, look at the industriousness you set yourselves to. It does me proud. You will certainly be done long before Sunday, then.
Sunday? You went today, then, Robert?
Yes, my dear. I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green a place it is. But you'll see it often. I promised him that I would walk there on a Sunday. My little child. My little child.
He left the room and went upstairs into the room above, which was lighted cheerfully and hung with Christmas. There was a chair set close beside the child, and there were signs of someone having been there lately. Poor Bob sat down in it, and when he had thought a little and composed himself, he kissed the lifeless little face. He was reconciled to what had happened, and went down again quite composed.
I must say, my walk home was much lightened by the kindness of a stranger this evening, Mr. Scrooge's nephew. I've scarcely seen him but once, and meeting him in the street today, he said that I looked a little down. He asked what distressed me, I told him. And he, being the most pleasant-speaking gentleman you've ever heard, told me he was heartily sorry for it, and for my good wife. Which, by the way, I can never guess how he knew that.
Knew what, my dear?
Why, that you were a good wife.
Well, everybody knows that.
Very well observed, my dears. I hope they do. Mr. Fred continued, though, saying clear that if he might be of service to us Crachits in any way, we would always be welcomed at his own home. Now, it wasn't for the sake of anything he might be able to do for us, so much as his kind way of saying all this that was quite delightful. It really seemed as if he had known our Tiny Tim and felt with us.
I'm sure he's a good soul.
You would be sure of it, my dear, if you saw and spoke to him. I shouldn't be at all surprised, mark what I say, if he got Peter a better situation.
Only hear that, Peter.
And then Peter will be keeping company with someone and setting up for himself.
Oh, get along with you!
It's just as likely as not one of these days. There's plenty of time for that, my dear. But, however, and whenever we part from one another, I'm sure that none of us shall forget poor Tiny Tim, shall we? Or this first parting that there was among us.
Never!
Never, Father.
And I know, my dears, that when we recollect how patient and how mild he was, although he was a little child, we shall not quarrel easily among ourselves and forget poor Tiny Tim in doing it.
Never!
No, Father, never.
Truly.
I am very happy. I am very happy. Spirit of Tiny Tim, thy childish essence was from God.
Spectre. Something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it, but I know not how. Tell me what man that was whom we saw lying dead.
Indeed, there seemed no order in these latter visions save that they were in the future. But among all familiar faces, Scrooge felt he saw every one but his own.
This court through which we hurry is the place of my occupation and has been for a length of time. I see the house. Let me behold what I shall be in days to come. The house is yonder. Why do you point away?
Scrooge hastened to the window of his office and looked in. It was an office still, but not his. The furniture was not the same, and the figure in the chair was not himself. The phantom pointed as before. He joined it once again, and wondering why and whither his self had gone, accompanied it until they reached an iron gate. He paused to look round before entering.
A churchyard. Here, then, the wretched man whose name I have now to learn surely lay underneath the ground. It's a worthy place, overrun by grass and weeds, choked up with too much burying, fat with repleted appetite.
The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one.
Here. Before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of things that will be, or are they the shadows of things that may be only?
Look here.
Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends to which, if persevered in, they must lead. But if the courses are departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus with what you show me.
The spirit was immovable as ever. Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge.
Read.
Am I the man who lay upon the bed?
Read.
No, spirit, oh no, no, spirit, hear me. I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been but for this intervention. Why show me this if I am past all hope?
For the first time, the hand appeared to shake.
Good spirit, your nature intercedes for me and pities me. Assure me that I may yet change these shadows you have showed me by an altered life. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone.
In his agony, he caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but Scrooge was strong in his entreaty and detained it. The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him. Holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost.
Yes. This bedpost is my own. This bed is my own. The room is my own. Oh, but best and happiest of all, the time before me is my own to make amends in. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and the Christmas time, be praised for this. I say it on my knees, Lord Jacob, on my knees. The bed curtains, they are not torn down. They are not torn down, rings and all. They are here. I am here. The shadows of the things that would have been may be dispelled. They will be. I know they will.
His hands were busy with his garments all this time, turning them inside out, putting them on upside down, tearing them, mislaying them, making them parties to every kind of extravagance.
I don't know what to do. I am as light as a feather. I am as happy as an angel. I am as merry as a schoolboy. I am as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to the whole world. Hello here. Whoop, hello. There's the saucepan that the gruel was in. There's the door by which the ghost of Jacob Marley entered. And there's the corner where the ghost of Christmas present sat. The window where I saw the wandering spirit. It's all right. It's all true. It all happened. I don't know what day of the month it is. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. Never mind, I don't care. I'd rather be a baby. Hello, whoop, hello here.
Running to the window, he opened it and put out his head. No fog, no mist, clear and bright, jovial, stirring, cold, piping for the blood to dance to.
Golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet, fresh air, merry bells. Oh, glorious, glorious. What's today?
He called downward to a child in Sunday clothes, who perhaps had loitered in to look about him.
Eh?
What's today, my fine fellow?
Today? Why, Christmas Day.
It's Christmas Day. I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. They can do anything. Like, of course they can. Of course they can. Hello, my fine fellow.
Hello.
Do you know the poulterers in the next street but one at the corner?
I should hope I did.
An intelligent boy. A remarkable boy. Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one.
What? The one as big as me?
What? A delightful boy. It's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, my buck.
It's hanging there now.
Is it? Go and buy it.
Pull the other one.
No, I am in earnest. Go and buy it and tell them to bring it here so I may give them direction where to take it. Come back with the man, I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes, and I'll give you half a crown.
The boy was off like a shot.
I'll send it to Bob Crachit's. He shan't know who sends it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. No pranksters made such a joke as sending it to Bob's will be.
He went downstairs to open the street door, ready for the coming of the poulterer's man. As he stood there waiting for his arrival, the knocker caught his eye.
I shall love it as long as I live. I scarcely ever looked at it before. What an honest expression it has on its face. It's a wonderful knocker. Oh, here's the turkey. And what a turkey indeed. My, if this beast ever stood on those legs, it's a Christmas miracle they didn't snap like wax. Hello, whoop, hello. How are you? Merry Christmas. Why, it's impossible to carry that to Camden Town. You must have a cab.
He dressed himself all in his best, and at last got out into the streets. The people were by this time pouring forth as he had seen them with the ghost of Christmas present, and walking with his hands behind him, Scrooge regarded every one with a delighted smile. He looked so irresistibly pleasant, in a word, that 3 or 4 good-humored fellows said,
"Good morning, sir. A Merry Christmas to you."
And Scrooge said often afterwards that of all the blithe sounds he had ever heard, those were the blithest in his ears. He had not gone far when, coming on towards him, he beheld the portly gentleman who had walked into his counting-house the day before and had asked for donations. It sent a pang across his heart to think how these old gentlemen would look upon him when they met. But he knew what path lay straight before him, and he took it.
My dear sir, if I might shake your hands, how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. A Merry Christmas to you, sir.
Oh, Mr. Scrooge?
Yes, that is my name, and I fear it may not be a pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon. And will you have the goodness?
Lord bless me. Oh, my dear Mr. Scrooge, are you serious?
If you please, not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me that favor?
My dear sir, I don't know what to say to such munification.
Don't say anything, please. Come and see me. Will you both come and see me?
We shall.
Thank ye. I am much obliged to you. I thank you 50 times. Bless you.
He went to church and walked about the streets and watched the people hurrying to and fro, and patted the children on the head and questioned beggars and looked down into the kitchens of houses and up to the windows and found that everything could yield him pleasure. He had never dreamed that any walk, that anything, could give him so much happiness. In the afternoon, he turned his steps towards his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock, but he made a dash and did it.
Oh, my lovely niece. The pleasure is mine to meet you at last. Is your husband, my nephew, at home, my dear?
Yes, indeed, Uncle. Quite the pleasure to meet you as well.
Oh, such a nice girl. Thank you. Thank you truly.
Yeah.
Such a lovely home you both have cultivated. So Christmassy and warm. Oh, Fred.
Why, bless my soul. Who's that?
It's I, your Uncle Scrooge. I have come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?
Let you in? My good dear sir, my dear uncle, it is a mercy I do not shake your arm off at the shoulder. I should say our party will be quite full after long. If you are all right with that.
The more, the merrier on Christmas, nephew. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful unanimity, wonderful happiness.
And the evening was wonderful indeed. The dinner was the most splendid Scrooge could recall in some time, and all greatly enjoyed the battle of wits that ensued whenever he and his sharp-minded niece were put against each other in a game. Late into the evening they danced, ate, and sang the joys of Christmas. But he was early at the office the next morning.
Oh, I shall be as early as I can be. If I can only be there first and catch Bob Crachit coming late. Here we are, and now...
The clock struck 9. No Bob. 1:15, no Bob. He was a full 18 minutes and a half behind his time. Scrooge sat with his door wide open that he might see him come into his desk. His hat was off before he opened the door, his comforter too. He was on his stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock.
What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?
I'm very sorry, sir. I'm behind my time.
You are? Yes, I think you are. Step this way, sir, if you please.
It's only once a year, sir. It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir.
Now, I'll tell you what, my friend. I am not going to stand this sort of thing any longer, and therefore, I am about to raise your salary.
Sir? Is all well, sir?
More than it has been in some time. A Merry Christmas, Bob. A merrier Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, than I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and endeavor to assist your struggling family, and we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a bowl of Christmas punch, Bob. Make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Crachit.
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh, and little heeded them, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good, at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the outset, and knowing that such as these would be blind anyway, he thought it quite as well that they should wrinkle up their eyes in grins as have the malady in less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that was enough for him. He had no further dealings with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle ever afterwards. Abstinence from bitterness, anger, dour moods, greed, self-centered acts, or unforgiving thoughts. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us, and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed,
God bless us.
Everyone.
This has been a no-refund theater adaptation of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. A special thanks to our sound mixer, John Angelo, for joining NRT on another adventure, to Tyler Davey for going above and beyond with our promotional material, to Kieran Dempsey for his expert cat wrangling, to Dan Hackathorn and Juliet Corrigan, to all our friends and families for keeping us safe, and of course to No Refund Theater for inspiring all of us. I wish you all a good night until we meet again.